what people don't realize is that this business is about consistency and persistence. And we have found persistence overcomes resistance. Anything great in life and anything worth pursuing is going to take time. Your credit impacts every facet of your life. And waiting the necessary time in order for it to rectify is absolutely a must. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Rebuild and Rise Show. I am your host, Micah Smith, and this is actually our episode number 1. And in this episode, we are going to do a deep dive into some of the myths of credit. But before I jump into the myths and the misunderstandings as far as how credit works, I actually just want to give you a little bit of background on myself, how I got into this industry, and give you a little bit of a precursor as to what brought me to here today. The proverbial they says that you are most qualified to help the people that you used to be. And that is why I am here. So about 12 years ago, I'm actually from Colorado, born and raised. I was recruited into the industry of credit. Now, I thought it was the stupidest thing. I actually hung up on the recruiter 4 different times because I'm thinking to myself, this person is clearly not looking at my resume. I don't have a background in finance. I did not study it. And to make things more hilarious in my mind, I had terrible credit. And I'm like, why would this credit firm want to recruit me to work for them? Well, after my very obstinate self and my ego-driven self started to listen to the recruiter about what the position was all about, it started to make more sense. So they liked me for my background in speech communications as well as my background in sales. And I'm like, okay, that makes more sense. So I took the position after going into quite a few different interviews, and I realized that this was actually going to be my next venture. And I knew that this was something special. I didn't know how I knew, I just knew. It was like this gut feeling. If you've ever had this gut feeling that there was something you were supposed to pursue, that was that gut feeling. And so I put everything I had into it. And the most important thing that I've always done in life, and I think that everybody should focus on, is I always do more than what I get paid to do. And because of that, I've never lacked in any way. And I remember a month before I even started with the company, I asked them for training materials. I'm like, what can I get my hands on so that I can come in prepared and I can blow everybody out of the water? And they were pretty dismayed, actually, by my request. So I was just so focused on doing the best I possibly could because I knew this position, for whatever reason, was going to take me to the next level in life. And so when I had the opportunity through this company to see New York, they straight up asked me, they're like, hey, how do you feel about New York? And I'm like, well, I've never been there, but I'll try anything twice. And so I hopped on a plane. And I had Waze and I dropped into dirty LaGuardia. And I will tell you this, I felt at home. I had this feeling of invigoration that I had never felt before. And I knew at that moment I was meant to be in New York. And very quickly, probably within about a month or 2 of my career, I realized that this was a vocation. And for those of you that don't know what a vocation is a calling. And I had this aha moment that I was going to be helping people understand something that I myself had suffered with in so many instances. And I will tell you personally, being in the credit space, some of the biggest things that we see a lot of people who are extremely embarrassed. They're extremely embarrassed about not having the best credit. And here's something that I actually wanted to share with you. I do a lot of reading, and I always give credit to where credit is due. I actually picked up a wonderful book called The Psychology of Money. A good friend of mine sent it to me. He's actually in the finance space as well. And something that is in this book that really stuck out with me, it says, be careful who you praise and admire. Be careful who you look down upon and wish to avoid becoming. Or just be careful when assuming that 100% of outcomes can be attributed to effort and decisions. But realize that not all success is due to hard work and not all poverty is due to laziness. Keep this in mind when judging people, including yourself. And one of the biggest values that we have at my firm, Mike Abigail, basically the policy set up where we don't judge, because we are one bad decision, one bad instance from maybe being in the same boat as somebody else. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I dispel is, actually, I was having a conversation with a very well-to-do brokerage, and I do business all over the country. And I was doing an intro meeting with a brokerage that I'm going to be doing some business with. And it's funny because they were like, yeah, we just wanted to get to know you a little bit better before we said yes to having you into our firm. Then I said, absolutely. And they said, Micah, they said, we kind of feel like that maybe, credit was really just more so for someone who didn't have any money. Maybe they weren't actually even capable of buying a house. And I love breaking down and dispelling this myth, because that's the misconception that people have, is they think that people with poor credit are just people with no money. And it's not the case. One of my favorite principles that I've taught for years is that there's no bias towards wealth in the algorithms, and it doesn't matter the amount of money that you have in your pocket. So I was giving them some examples. We've got people that come across our desk. So for instance, in the state of New York, co-ops, if you are trying to rent a co-op in the state of New York, their requirement is for you to have a 700 credit score. And we had an individual who was trying to buy a co-op in cash, and they got denied because their credit was subpar. So it's not just how much money you have in the bank. If you can buy something in cash, like, cash is not always king. A lot of times it is, but a lot of times it isn't. And there's another, for instance, where we've got people who are making $1.5 million a year, $2 million a year, $3 million a year. And because their credit is so banged up, they can't get approved for their mortgage. And so there's so many misconceptions that it just impacts those people, right, who maybe aren't paying their bills, who refuse to pay their bills. And I think one of my favorite mentors had said it best. And he said, Micah, when people pick up habits, they're usually caught, not taught. And one of the greatest things, so in this book, I highlighted so many pages, but it talked about just basically the habits that we are simply pick them up because of what we're exposed to, right? So what we're exposed to, the other factors around us. So say someone, right, who was in Australia, who had never been, in a recession before, right, is going to have a very different outlook on money compared to an American who has experienced a recession, right? And it's just people's relationship with money and credit as a whole really comes down to what they've experienced. And we can't discredit someone's experience because their viewpoint as far as like what they spend their money on, that's very normal to them. They normalize it because of what they've been exposed to. And the other part is, and I think that I myself also suffered with this as well. And even to this day, there's a little part of me that cringes every time I talk about the fact that I had a poor credit score, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was that person. But then I have to remind myself, I'm like, what person is that, Micah? A human being, a person that makes mistakes, someone who has lived life, someone who has lived on the edge of their seat, someone who has picked themselves up by their bootstraps and, kept moving forward. And, I actually had a meeting with my team this morning. I meet with my team every morning. One of our team members had made a mistake, and I had to quote Rocky. My quoting of Rocky was like, listen, in life, it's not about how hard you get hit, right? I'm sorry, I totally screwed that up. It's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit. and keep moving forward, right? And he says that this world is a mean and nasty place and the world will beat you to your knees if you let it, right? But you can't live that way. You have to stand up and you have to beat back. You have to be strong. You have to be vigilant and you have to have that ability to fight back. And that's something that I talk to my team about. So it's not about making the mistake. It's about how you react to the mistake. And so some tips that I want to give to everyone here as we talk about credit and talk about the embarrassment that people feel. Listen, I want you to stop feeling the embarrassment. There's a reason why on Instagram I'm known as the Fit Credit Doctor. I love doctor because the way I think about it is this. Is bad credit to me is an illness. It's a sickness and we have a cure. And we will give you the roadmap, we'll give you the medicine, we'll give you the tools, we'll give you everything that you need in order to be successful to get back onto a better path. And I love doctors, well, simply because, right, if you go to the doctor, of course, you might be embarrassed because you're talking to another human being about your deepest, darkest, scariest things, right? When you're sick and you're not feeling well, it's really, really scary. Let's face it. But at the same time, hopefully you're a little less embarrassed to show your doctor versus, right, maybe your best friend or maybe someone that you really look up to. And so for us, we tell people we've seen it all and there's nothing to be embarrassed about. There's nothing to be ashamed by. And so my personal story, I will tell you this. So I'm over 5 years sober now. And for me, the one of my mentors, she said to me, Micah, she said, you're only as sick as your secrets. And I have applied that to everything in life. And one of the biggest things that I would love to just beg of every one of you is to get rid of the ego, knock out the ego, because really that's where the embarrassment or the shame comes from. It comes from our ego, right? We're wanting to protect ourselves. And I would say ditch the ego. When I was getting sober, one of the greatest books I read said, your ego speaks strongest, it speaks first, and it speaks loudest. And it's always wrong. It's always wrong. And so once you put the ego aside and you simply start to become honest with yourself, which was actually how I got sober, I had to become honest with myself. I had to become honest about what I actually wanted out of life. I had to be honest with what was I doing that was keeping me from getting to all my goals and dreams and visions and things that I wanted. And the moment that I got real with myself and the moment that I was honest with myself, things really started to shift and things really started to change. And my life took off in a way that I couldn't even have been prepared for. But it was years and years and years of battling with not wanting to be honest with myself, not wanting to let out my secrets of not being perfect and having things that I struggled with. But the moment that I surrendered and I relinquished my control was the moment that I was free. And that's what I encourage everyone to do is just remember, right? The moment that you release control and the moment that you're okay, like I'm a human being, I made a mistake. Listen, we want to help you. This is the whole reason. This is the inception of my firm. And we're going to talk about so much throughout this podcast, about the statistics and how poor credit actually does keep you broke. And so we're going to give you a lot of tools as we go through this, but I wanted to give you a little intro to myself, and I want to give you one of the bigger myths as well. Let's talk practicality here. Let's give you some good wisdom to take with you, because one of the biggest things I want to talk about is you cannot track what you cannot measure. So step number one actionable step for you in having a better financial footprint and having a more financially sound life. And we're going to keep this on credit today. Step number one is you want to know where you're at. Roughly about 25% of Americans have absolutely no idea where their credit score stands. There's a lot more knowledge and a lot more information being pumped into the system today by a lot of free resources. You've got, the bureaus, constantly trying to pump the economy with tons of information. They're a money marketing geniuses. I will tell you at that. And I will tell you this, I have no issues with the free credit monitoring services. At bare minimum, start there. MyAnnualReport.com actually shifted what they would allow ever since COVID. So prior to COVID, you were allowed one free report a year. And mind you, you will not get scores with that report. You would have to pay for the scores separately because the bureaus say the scores should not be included. We believe that you should have to pay for the scores. So if you go to myannualreport.com and you get your free credit report there, that's the information that the bureaus have on file for you. So you can certainly get that, or you can use one of the many, 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 many credit monitoring services that we have out there. We have a few that we use in-house to soft check someone's credit score, and a soft check just simply means that it's not impacting the credit whatsoever, right? So I would implore every single person that is watching this, that is hearing this, if you are not checking your credit every single day, I want you to start checking your credit every single day. Credit Karma gives you that ability. So does Experian. Those are the two free apps that you can download to your phone right now, and you can actually see what your credit score is with them. Now, here's what I want to talk about, which nobody talks about enough, and this is what I've spent the last 12 years doing all over the country, and hopefully this reaches about 1 million more people. But essentially, I want you to understand when you go to Credit Karma, understand that algorithm is not a scoring algorithm that a mortgage company will use. It's not an algorithm that any sort of lender is going to use. It's called Vantage 3.0. It's an algorithm. It's a mathematical equation, right? So essentially, you're looking at Credit Karma, and let's say you want to buy a home, which 98% of the clients that we assist are trying to buy a home. And if that is your prerogative, understand this: you are not going to see the same credit scores on Credit Karma as you see through a lender. And the reason why, very simply put, it's a different algorithm, right? So on average, Credit Karma is about 40 to 60 points higher than what a loan originator is going to pull. Okay, so be prepared for that. If you want information, so there is a great resource out there called myfico.com, myfico.com, and we are no way affiliated, but myfico.com will give you access to your mortgage scores. So you want to look for 5, 4, and 2. Those are the names of them. Well, Beacon 5.0, Farsight version 2, Classic 4. Those are the names of the algorithms in the mortgage industry, but you would want to use 5, 4, and 2. And essentially, you would be able to see what your mortgage scores are. They'll also give you access to auto loan scores and different types of credit card scores. There's multiple algorithms that they'll give you access to. So I do implore you, if you want to see your accurate scores where lenders are going to pull your credit, that's a great resource for you. It's not free, but guys, nothing in life is usually free, right? You usually have to pay for something exceptional. So myfico.com is exceptional. We are a big fan of their resource. We have closed a lot of loans by using them. In addition to that, so the worst disparity I think I ever saw was I saw Credit Karma. So a young lady at a 640 on Credit Karma, she went to her mortgage lender, and her mortgage lender pulled a 440, a 200-point discrepancy. And she was mortified. And it was because she had negative items on the credit report from 3, 4, 5 years ago. Again, different algorithms and different ways of computing the information. So they're not going to look at the history the same way, and they're not going to compute it the same way, because why? They're not trying to give you a loan, right? So she was mortified when this happened. So we are trying to help people. We're trying to help alleviate these big moments of, oh my gosh, that just feeling of you've been punched in the gut, and those feelings of absolute despair and discouragement. And just know this, when it comes to credit and credit repair, and we'll get more into it, but understand this: everything negative has the potential to be removed under the laws that govern the bureaus, that govern the creditors. So just remember that as we continue to dive into all these little things that we're going to talk about over the next few years. So that's step number 1, right? So you can't track what you can't measure. You need to know where you're at. That is step number 1. So at bare minimum, start with a free resource, start with Credit Karma, start with myfico.com, right? Start with Experian, and just know this: whoever pulls your credit, that's your score with them. Scores are not transferable from industry to industry, okay? So that's step number 1, and I wanted to go over with you. And the second thing I wanted to go over with you is I wanted to go over one of the biggest issues that we see. So Most people, so when I teach my classes, and I'm just going to pretend like I'm teaching my class right now, in my class, I always say, listen, to pay or not to pay, it always sounds like I'm about to quote Shakespeare. And it is around negative items. So it's around collections, it's around charge offs, to pay, to not to pay. And to keep it really, really simple for today, and just remember this, your credit is your financial fingerprint. So anything that we discuss today and any day thereafter, just understand everything is situational and certain situations are going to be different than others. So it's not one size fits all, right? So this isn't 100% of the time, right? This is most of the time. So if you have a collection, if you have a charge off on the credit report, right? Most people assume if I pay the negative item, let's just say I sent out a huge newsletter last night on Verizon. Verizon's a very common one that we see. So if you have a collection on with Verizon and it's on your credit report and you're like, I need to raise my credit score, the thought process is if I pay it, it goes away. Here is the actual truth. If you pay a collection, it is not going to make it go away. The phone call is usually going to go like this. Hey, people at Verizon, we'll call them that, people at Verizon. Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and take care of this balance. I see that you say I owe you 400, I'll give you 150. Oh yeah, absolutely. That's great. We'll take care of that for you. No problem. We're going to go ahead and we will, as soon as you take care of this balance, we're going to go ahead and we're going to mark it as satisfied to the bureaus. So we'll report that right away to the bureaus. Absolutely. No problem. You got it. Okay. Sounds great. Then what happens is the client pulls their credit report a month later and they're like, oh, my score dropped 50 points, 40 points, 60 points, 100 points. And they're freaking out. And the problem is, right, so the older something gets, the less it impacts you. So, like, let's say that this was a 5-year-old collection, it's doing very little to no damage. So, the moment that you pay it, all of a sudden it becomes brand spanking new on the credit report. And then what happens is you actually refresh what's called the date of last activity. So DLA is the acronym, and date of last activity is what consumers will see on their credit report. So the moment you pay it, you refresh the DLA, and that negative item, right, appears brand new according to the algorithms. And that negative item will stay on the report another 7 years from date of satisfaction. And people are just mortified when it comes to this because, right, they parted ways with all of this money, think that they were doing the right thing. But I'm going to tell you this, when it comes to credit, and I say this in every class, I'm like, if you are using common sense, that's your first problem. Common sense logic does not apply when it comes to your credit score. And I'm going to tell you this, right? So, the end of the day, of course, I always come bearing solutions, right? So people are like, okay, so what do I do? That's where we come in. And I think this is probably the hardest part of what I've done over the last, 12 years is trying to help people understand what credit repair is and how it works. So when we are trying to repair somebody's credit, what we're doing is we're going to the bureaus, we're going to the creditors, and we're upholding laws to the very, very umpteenth degree. And one of the main ones is the Fair Credit Reporting Act, right? We're upholding that to the very, very umpteenth degree. Simply states that everything on the credit report must be 100% accurate, complete, and verifiable. So very long story short, just to make it super short and sweet, right? So when we go to the credit bureaus, we're sending in a list of investigations and questions for them to answer. Well, they take that list of questions and they send it off to the collection agency or whoever is reporting it. Their job is to report all that information that we've requested back to the bureaus, right? They have to verify it. And if they can't, then the law states it must be removed. And they usually only have 30 days from point A to point Z, right? So for it to go from us to the bureaus, to the creditor, back to the bureaus, back to the client, that process is really only supposed to take 30 days. Now, oftentimes we see it actually takes a little bit longer. But understand, right, the process can be very time consuming. So what happens a lot of times is this, is people get super discouraged because the bureaus only respond to the clients. So even if you have full power of attorney, oftentimes we're still seeing a lot of the bureaus will only respond directly to the client. And the client will oftentimes get a templated letter saying, oh, we looked into this, we verified that this is accurate, we're not doing anything. And a lot of people are like if I had a bunch of papers right now, I'd throw them up in the air And they're like, oh my gosh, I guess that's it. It's over. And we're like, no, this is literally just the beginning. And what people don't realize is that this business is about consistency and persistence. And we have found persistence overcomes resistance. Anything great in life and anything worth pursuing is going to take time. Your credit impacts every facet of your life. And waiting the necessary time in order for it to rectify is absolutely a must. One of the biggest frustrations I have with the society that we're in today is we're in a microwave society. We expect things to happen quickly. We graduate from college with a master's degree thinking we're going to be making $500,000 a year. We start a fitness program and we think we're going to be supermodels in a week. We start a diet and we think that we're going to be again supermodels in a week. We think that, if we work really, really hard, for a week, all of a sudden, why aren't we making millions and millions and millions of dollars? And most people, right, they sell themselves short. And instead of just continuing to put in the work day after day after day after day, week after week after week, month after month after month, year after year after year, right, everybody gives up way too early. And that's probably one of my personal biggest pet peeves in our program is when we see people with so much potential. And I truly believe that right about before something great is about to happen, I feel like people quit. And luckily for me in my life, I have been the exact opposite. When things get really, really tough, I'm like, all right, it's time to go a little bit harder. And so while you're in this journey of bettering your finances, bettering your life, bettering yourself, understand it's going to take time and it's going to take consistency and persistency. And it's like a shower. If you don't shower every day, you're going to start to stink. You have to do it day in and day out, and you have to be focused and cognizant about it, right? Where focus goes, energy flows. Tony Robbins says that a lot. And, right, what you are thinking about, right, what you are focused on is really, really important. And I want to share a couple of really impactful things that I also have picked up along the way. So one of my absolute favorite mentors in life is John Maxwell. And one of my favorite things that he talks about is taking responsibility. And you know what he says taking responsibility is? He says it's picking yourself. It's motivating yourself. It's bringing intentionality and energy to everything you do. And I'm going to tell you, it gets very, very difficult to do this. It's not easy, right? It's not like I wake up feeling like I want to do this, but I know that it's going to help me achieve my long-term goals. And there's going to be days where it's going to be really, really difficult. You're going to feel like you're hitting walls a lot of times, whether it's with your credit or with your personal life. And one of the most important things we talk about, and this is actually something that I teach my team is growth begins, right? So this entire podcast is really going to be about growth, right? So goal-oriented versus growth-oriented. And again, this comes from my mentor, John Maxwell. It's a shift in mentality. And we want people to understand adopting a teachable spirit is going to be where growth begins. That is where growth begins. And that's actually one of the reasons I will never consider myself a master or an expert. Anything that you've read about me where that is the title, those are somebody else's words and not mine. I'm not a master. I'm not an expert. In fact, in just a couple of weeks, I am going to go sit in a classroom for about 36 hours straight to just learn from people who have more experience, more knowledge than I do, so that I can bring this to my customers and better serve them. And one of my favorite things, again, that John Maxwell talks about. So there's a quote in the book that says, it's from Beverly Sills. Beverly Sills said, "There are no shortcuts to any place worth going." And John Maxwell also said the other day, if hard work was the key to success, then most people would rather pick the lock. Is that you? Would you rather pick the lock? Or do you want to walk the road less traveled and join the small, select few group of people that are going to come out the other side victorious, triumphant, and have what we even, if we want to stick to the topic of credit, let's talk buying power. What is credit, right? People, we talk about this all the time. What is credit? Well, credit is a number of things. We call it buying power. I did a great podcast with one of my friends, Ronnie. She's actually a big realtor in Manhattan, and this is one of the biggest things that we discussed is credit is buying power. It's absolutely true. If you've ever had the not so pleasant experience of walking into a car dealership or a mortgage company, or like those are my experiences walking into a car dealership knowing I had subpar credit, and in fact, I was so embarrassed and so unsure of where I was at, I didn't even bother going to a reputable dealership. I ended up finding myself in a place where it was a buy here, pay here, no credit check needed. I ended up getting such a horrible interest rate on a lemon car. I died in the middle of the highway. I had this exorbitant payment on a car that didn't even work. And these are the experiences that I've had. And instead of having to have my customers go through the same embarrassing thing over and over and over again, we offer solutions. I didn't even know credit repair was a thing when I was younger. I didn't even know that was possible. And again, I am most qualified to help the people and the person that I used to be. And the person that I used to be, I used to avoid things, right? I used to avoid things thinking that, right, well, maybe it's magically going to get better on its own, and it doesn't. So the avoidance is going to be the surest and fastest short-term strategy to absolute and utter disaster and failure. I will just simplify it at that. I wanted to give you a quote, but I can't find it in my notes here. And so with that being said, I just want to encourage everyone, and again, this came from another one of my mentors, but they talk about the importance, and this has been my life to a T, but it's more important to go slowly up the right mountain than to go quickly up the wrong mountain. And one of the biggest things that I've learned in my life is that fast success builds ego while slow success builds character. And to me, I would much rather have character than to have a giant ego. I mean, to me, there is nothing more uninspirational than someone strutting around with this giant ego, thinking the whole world owes them and thinking that they're amazing. Like that to me is just the epitome of exactly who I never want to be. And the thing I think about all the time with our customers, with my life, is when people have this expectation that things are going to be done in a moment. I've always had this belief that rejection is God's protection. And we may not feel like that at the time. We might feel like, why is this happening to me? Why? But remember this, life can only be lived forwards and understood backwards. And if I had gotten everything I wanted at exactly the time I wanted it, I would have squandered it away. And so as you're going through this journey of life and, your financial woes, I want you to do me a favor really quickly. If you're in the car, I want you to just slow down for a second. I want you to pull over and I want you to stop and I want you to think. Now, if you're at the point in your life right now where you've been really successful, right? I want you to sit back and think about all the choices that you've made that have led to you getting here. If you don't like where you're at, I also want you to reflect and think about all of the choices that have led you here. Either person, I can guarantee you've done a lot of really good things along the way. And if you are looking to making the ultimate shift, the first step you have to take is you just have to be willing to do something different. If you continue to do the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result, right? They say that's the definition of insanity, right? So at the end of the day, if you're looking for something different, change it. One of my favorite people on the planet, I've been to many of his seminars in person, Tony Robbins, said something very profound, and I thought this was really interesting, and I'd love to share this with you. He said that if you don't like your job, change it. You don't like your situation, change it. You don't like your environment, change it. You don't like other people, you don't get along with other people, change yourself. And he said that. I was like, oh man. I was like, talk about having to take accountability. I'm just like, oh my gosh. And I know there's probably a lot of you who are also going to be chuckling with me. But just remember these words because they are so, so powerful. So as we're navigating through life, it's really important that we are accountable and that we're responsible, right? We can't track, we can't measure. And having knowledge is certainly powerful. I think that knowledge is a wonderful thing to have. And what I want to wrap up with is this is I want to wrap up with something really profound, which is action reduces fear and it increases courage. And think about this in your life, right? Think about how many times you have been afraid of something. And there's a great book out there, and she's amazing. If you've never checked out Mel Robbins, I highly recommend checking out Mel Robbins. She wrote The 5-Second Rule. And so I implore you to the moment that you start to feel afraid of doing something, live like I do. If I feel afraid of doing something, then I know I have to do it. And if you can live that way, guess what starts to happen? That fear starts to go away and your confidence starts to soar. But I'm going to tell you what's going to happen if you don't face fear in the face. Your self-confidence will start to erode. And that's the key. And what people don't realize is that the longer you put something off, the longer you procrastinate about fixing something that you know needs to be fixed. Like I knew I needed to fix my credit. I knew it. And the more I put it off, the more my self-confidence just continued to erode. Day after day after day. The more that I knew I needed to stop drinking, but continued to drink, the more my confidence eroded day after day after day. You know what's really funny? Ironic, I should say. It's not funny per se. It's ironic. But when I stopped drinking and I knew that I was never going to pick up alcohol again, my confidence soared so high, I had the confidence to open my own firm. And that single-handedly was keeping me from opening my own firm. The number one person that you need to be accountable to is you. So stop making promises to yourself that you don't keep because all you're doing is you're eroding your self-confidence. So here's what I'm going to ask of every single one of you to do. I want every single one of you that knows that they need to do something, right? I want you to send me a message. I want you to tell me what it is. I want you to send me an email. I want you to tell me what it is that you're taking action on today, that you have said enough is enough is enough, right? If you want help with your credit, definitely reach out because we really want to help you with that. We'll give you a free consultation. Absolutely. Our team is amazing and they care more about you than you could ever imagine a human being caring about another human being. That's step number one. But I want to hear from you. What have you decided after listening or watching this today? What are you going to take action on? That's all I got for you.